I don't know.
But seriously, he is a black guy. No, he's a black guy. Limbaugh's pointed that out before. But anyway, here's how Kavanaugh sort of made the news this week. Now, does any website or newspaper or anything have more fucking worthless sections than HuffPost? This is from HuffPost Personal. Okay. Here's what happened when Twitter trolls almost ruined my life. By Sophie Versbaus. And I believe she's a Jew. Like so many women in my orbit, I lost my mind during the Senate confirmation hearings on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. I do not say this to be flippant about mental illness, which I suffer from. Or to minimize the trauma experienced by survivors, whom I count myself among. But because I felt utterly insane sitting in my cubicle watching MSNBC with tears streaming down my face. That is pretty insane. Short on outlets to relieve the rage building up inside me, I tweeted, "Do not fuck men who support Kavanaugh," 4 times with emojis for emphasis. I didn't give it another thought until later that night when I saw the like count climbing higher and higher. Ever the social media manager, I was pleased to see my content performing well, especially since so many of the women engaging with it were apparently suffering through an equally traumatizing week.
Of course
the next day, I met my mom to attend the New Yorker Festival panels around the city. Now this is definitely a Jew. It's like, Mom, let's go attend New Yorker Festival panels. And as the afternoon blowed by, I noticed my Twitter notifications had taken a turn for the worse. Many people failed to grasp my nod to Lysistrata and instead took the message as a personal attack on them and their values. Others felt compelled to criticize my physical appearance, claiming I'd never find myself a real man.
Not with that nose.
Yeah. Some assumed I was a lesbian or called me one as a supposed slur. They called me ugly, a bitch, psychotic, a cunt, and a whore, as well as several anti-Semitic slurs I won't write down. My audible gasps while I scrolled through them quickly tipped off my mom that something was amiss. But since she is not a Twitter user, it was easy to assure her that they were just angry trolls blowing smoke through a screen. The last thing I wanted to cause her to worry about me more than she already does as a Jewish mother. By the time our afternoon event let out, my drama had jumped from Twitter to Instagram. I barely knew anyone who follows me on Twitter, but my Instagram followers are primarily friends, family members, and coworkers. The thought of them seeing what people were writing about me made me sick to my stomach. I didn't need my step-cousin once removed to see someone call me a dirty whore. I felt exposed and vulnerable to everyone in my life. Late that night, I was alerted by a concerned follower that things had spread to the accounts I run as a senior social media manager for a big book publisher. What these people didn't realize is that tweeting at my works account is reporting to me, since I'm the one who runs the accounts. My hands shook as I read dozens of comments from people like the Ohio principal who would stop stocking his school's library with classics from the publisher I work for unless I was terminated. Or the woman who could no longer buy her favorite author's books while I was employed there. I resisted pointing out that while my Twitter bio noted my employer, it also said, "Opinions all my own." Okay, so on her personal Twitter account, she brags about the fact that her job is that she's a social media manager for a particular publishing house, and then goes to tweeting all kinds of controversial shit. Isn't that genius?
But her social media is totally her opinion.
Yeah, and so I can see why they hired her to be the social media manager. She's obviously a genius at this shit. I hope things would cool off overnight, But by Sunday morning, they were replying to every single tweet on the publisher's feed. I consulted my parents, who agreed that the situation had grown out of control. My mom's easy dismissal of the situation less than 24 hours earlier was now replaced by constant worry as my notifications continued to blow up with hundreds of angry messages. This was now above my pay grade. I swallowed my pride and dialed my boss. To make matters worse, my call reached her while she was on a first date. For millennials, a Sunday afternoon phone call is the equivalent of an emergency flare. Well, who the fuck is it not? I mean, you call your boss and annoy him on Sunday, and it damn well better be something important, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
And if it was me, if I was the boss, and you call me and interrupt me on Sunday afternoon, I'd be all like, "You bothering me about people being mean to you on Twitter?"
Isn't your job to be on Twitter?
Yeah. I mean, can you handle your job?
I was just so traumatized I could barely hold the broken shard of Carlo Rossi to cut myself with.
Yeah. To make matters worse.
She's so distraught that she writes about it. You know,
Yeah.
She's ashamed about what people are calling her, and then she just decides to write it. She was probably overjoyed.
Damn, did I just vape on air?
Yep.
Son of a bitch.
And right before the show started, I told Chill we got to not vape on air. But anyway.
We got to bleep that out.
No, we're not going to bleep it out.
Bleep.
We're not going to bleep it out. That would be asking too much of my producer
Yeah,
to bleep out the vape.
So we got a Jewish shishka who's a rape survivor and also mentally ill.
Well, Shiksa is a non-Jew.
Right. She's a
Oh,
yenta.
really?
She's a yenta.
Oh, Yenta, yeah.
Yeah, Shiksa means like dirty whore. It literally means animal. But every time they call our women Shiksas, they're calling them whores. Well, it's one thing for us to call them that.
It's like, only I can hit my wife.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't look at me. Anyway. So Eva the professional, she calmly listened and then said she'd keep me abreast of any developments while she took the situation upward. I was left to wait it out. I'm sure her date was happy that their first date suddenly shifted into his date being all concerned about his Jewish social media manager's Twitter feed. I blocked dozens of accounts that night, many of them with leering photos of President Donald Trump in their profile pictures or hashtag MAGA in their bios. I reported several anti-Semitic comments, rape threats, and death threats to Twitter, which eventually recommended that I call law enforcement if I believed I was in immediate danger. There's no section of the social media handbook for judging whether a cyber rape threat is credible. So I just went to bed and said a non-religious prayer for my job. So she's one of the 80% of American Jews who is an atheist, who identifies.
I don't get it. Who do you pray to?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same thing.
Your twat.
I said a prayer to Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
It's Bella Abzug. The rest of that week was a blur. The harassment kept trickling in, and the most unsettling of which happened when my father got a phone call from an anonymous number telling him he should be ashamed of his nasty daughter. I knew my supportive liberal parents would support me, but my company, well, so much for the vaunted Jewish verbal IQ. Let me repeat that sentence. I knew my supportive liberal parents would support me. But my company, ever heard of a thesaurus?
Yeah, welcome to the Department of Redundancy Department.
Yeah. But my company stood by me more than I could have ever hoped. It championed the freedom of speech above all else while genuinely prioritizing my physical and mental well-being. Am I the only one here who is starting to get the feeling that she's an unpaid intern?
Yes.
At the suggestion of my office's building security, which had been made aware of the situation. Oh God, I'm certain that everyone within 100 feet of this bitch, wherever she went, was made aware of this situation.
Just so you know, I'm in danger.
Yeah.
I used a side entrance to get to work all week, lest a troll be waiting at the front door to harm me. Thankfully, no people made good on their threats. And by the next week, the situation had mostly blown over. Well, good idea to start writing about it on HuffPost now, then. I mean, it's not like it's going to get talked about on Neon Nazi podcasts or anything.
Right. Isn't the first rule about dealing with trolls is to just fucking ignore them? Not let them know how butthurt you get?
Yeah. I mean, why would Sophie versbaus write about this?
Can you imagine living your life in just sense of like such a prey mentality of just completely neurotic and afraid of everything?
Yeah.
This is the mind of a modern Jew.
Yeah. Unsurprisingly, Twitter trolls have short attention spans, although it sickens me to think about the person they undoubtedly moved on to. Having closely...
she's not getting the attention. She's butthurt.
Right.
She's feeling abandoned.
Exactly. Well, there is no happier Jew in the world than a Jew who can claim that they're being persecuted while not actually being forced into a fake shower room.
So true. Where's the lie?
At the end of that month, my menstrual flow was excessive. Brought on by this.
Who's going to pay for all this Kotex?
I called my boss.
You should have seen the mess I had at the Brazilian wax place.
Oh God.
Someone snuck into my medicine cabinet and tied all the strings on my tampons into little nooses.
It had to be one of those trolls.
Having
Replace
closely
my SSRIs with Tic Tacs ointment.
who put a shrimp in the gefilte fish?
It's not even kosher.
Having closely followed the 2016 election, I knew about Trump's army of Twitter champions, but until they shined their spotlight on me, I was blind to them as the force that they are. I wonder if the spotlight felt to her like the ones in the towers at the camps, you know.
It's like a rat when the subway you shine a flashlight at it.
Yeah. Through sheer numbers, they have the power to destroy people who speak out against their values. Oh, imagine that. And they're happy to do it. I'm lucky to work in an industry and for a company that values free speech. But had I been employed elsewhere, this could have done lasting damage to the career I care so deeply about. So many people asked me why I didn't delete my account when I thought my job might be in jeopardy, but the truth is that doing so never felt like an option. To delete my account would have meant letting them win, them being the Kavanaugh supporters and, by mere definition, Trump supporters, who were so offended by a few dozen characters of female rage that they wanted to ruin my life for it. I also didn't delete the tweet for several days for the same reason. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing the actions had affected me. Even as I said,
I wrote about it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Even as I sat cowering in my apartment, wishing for it all to stop. It wasn't until almost a week later, with a handful of trolls lingering on my company's account, that I decided to take it down. So she took down her company's account, I guess. I don't know.
Or the tweet.
Oh, yeah, maybe. By that point, I felt so fortunate to have the backing of my company that deleting one social media post to end the harassment felt like an easy decision. Anything to make those last few people who continued to email every public inbox listed on the company website move on. And then she tweeted, "Some no good, very bad personal news. My boyfriend and I broke up on Monday night. We dated for 4 years and lived together. Yes, this means I broke up with my dog too. I'm a hot. Yeah, well, apparently the dog belonged to the boyfriend. I'm heartbroken and exhausted and overwhelmed and just so sad. And it has a little tag under it that says, after the furor over her Kavanaugh tweet had blown over, the author broke up with her boyfriend and posted this tweet. The response reminded her how social media can provide a supportive and nurturing community. 6 weeks after the Kavanaugh hearings, I was reminded how social media can provide a supportive and nurturing community. I broke up with my boyfriend of 4 years. We had an apartment and a dog and a life, and just like that, it was all gone. 4 days later, after it all began to sink in, I tweeted the news. Within a few hours, I received a thread of support so generous, I cried many times over just looking at it. People from all over the world reach out to me, expressing their condolences for my relationship, their sadness for my sadness, their own stories of heartbreak to prove that I wasn't alone. Their well wishes would have been enough, but dozens of people Venmo'd me $5 or $10 each.
Oh my God.
Insisting I take myself out for a much needed drink on them. I even received a $100 gift card from Seamless, which enjoyed my tweet about my friend sending over tacos from my favorite restaurant to cheer me up. And she goes on talking about the kindness of strangers and everything. And that's basically it. But wow. I think, I think the people who listen to our show should show her how truly supportive a community that social media can be. So if you want to, contact her on Twitter and
well, what's her at?
It's at SVERSHBOW at versbaus or versbaus. Yeah. So let her know. Show her what a supportive and nurturing community we can be. God almighty. This is one of the biggest kvetch fests over nothing that I've seen in at least a week.
Well, they are good victims.
Yeah.
Well,
They're good at
they
making
seem to
themselves
revel in it
victims.
so much. Yeah, I mean, they just enjoy it so much. I mean, you could tell that she was dripping wet when she was writing.
yeah.
Well, it's attention, man. They fucking live for that shit.
Yep.
She's a woman and a Jew. It's like the worst combination.
Yeah, which
It's
means
like
that she's a
woman.
Yeah, which means that she's always persecuted and it's never her fault.
Yeah.
Cowering, as I was cowering in my apartment.
Since my boyfriend left me and took the dog, there's no one left to go down on me.
Yeah, and she didn't say it.
God.
She didn't say it, but the implication there is that she and the boyfriend broke up because of all this Twitter trauma.
Yeah. It's like, look, bitch, we've been together 4 years. I just can't take it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want you talking to me about this in bed. I don't want you talking about. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he's some sort of neurotic Jew as well, but even he had his fill. Peak
What am I
Jew.
going to do without poor Tyrone? He was so good to me.